Good evening. It's 7 o'clock on Monday, the 19th of April, and this is Scotland at 7 on Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this evening I'm presenting the programme from Edinburgh. I'm delighted, really delighted, to be joined this evening by our regular contributor, Chris McCusker. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Andrew. Good to see you.
And you too. Have you had a busy day on the campaigning today?
Yeah, mixing that with other things, and but yeah, I was out for a couple of hours this afternoon. So call a medic for Eastwood, just get that. And
Very good, very good. We'll start this evening with the coronavirus update as we usually do. As of 2 p.m. today, a total of 1,882,908 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and the UK government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,658,994 have been confirmed negative, and 223,914 have tested positive. There are 232 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. Not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There are no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,642. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 104 were in hospital last night, 14 of whom were in intensive care. And as of 8 a.m. today, 2,747,694 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 757,115 had also received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show that 127,274 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, and that is an increase of 4 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just in hospitals. Following on from that COVID update, we turn to election news, and firstly we have the Tory manifesto launched today. Douglas Ross launched the Conservative Party in Scotland's election manifesto, with his top priority being to oppose a Scottish independence referendum, to repeal the Referendums Act, and to cut the number of Scottish Cabinet Ministers from 12 to 6. On the NHS, he is proposing diverting £600 million in efficiency cuts to tackle the backlog in treatments caused by COVID, although he did not identify where these efficiencies will be coming from. Other measures in the manifesto include a £2 billion NHS funding increase across the next Parliament, £2.5 billion for energy efficiency in homes, to repeal the Hate Crime Act, rolling out full fibre broadband across Scotland by 2027, and £200 million to fill in potholes in the roads. Commenting on the Tory manifesto launch, the SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown said that the Tories' opposition to giving the people of Scotland a choice over their own future betrays the weakness of the Tories' position. Mr Brown said, "If there is a mandate for a referendum at this election, then Boris Johnson has no democratic or moral authority to try and block it." Chris, what strikes you about this manifesto that was launched this morning?
it's for me, it's actually quite similar to the Labour manifesto. I think they've borrowed, wee bits from here and wee bits from there, and they're all much of a muchness. The unionist parties are holding three of them. Because we have to make the distinction that the three unionist parties in Scotland are not actually registered in Scotland. They're actually registered in England, so their interests lie elsewhere. But intrinsically, all three of them are against the democratic will of the Scottish people. And let's just say, for argument's sake, you can tickle my funny bone here, but let's just say we get a huge majority, 72 seats or something like that. How they can deny Scotland, wanting to choose a different path is absolutely, bizarre. But not, uh, not unsurprising, because I think, to be honest, if the whole of Scotland voted for independence, the establishment parties would fight hard in order not to have that delivered.
Absolutely, and top of the list that we heard from Douglas Ross this morning was apparently a £2 billion NHS funding increase across the next Parliament, and the diversion of 600 million in what he called efficiency cuts to help with the backlog in treatments caused by COVID. Do you think that these Tory manifesto promises regarding spending for the NHS are credible?
Absolutely not. And you'll understand this when I say, Andrew, as a trade unionist, when I hear efficiency cuts, that's just double speak for redundancies. So, it makes no surprise to me that Douglas Ross would want to go down this road. The redundancies would come through privatisation, of course, which the Tories are very open to.
Absolutely, and given the way in which the Conservatives appear to be polling at the moment in the run-up to the election, do you think much of this manifesto is credible?
Much of it is fabricated, to be honest with you, and I can conject that many people in Scotland will see right through it. People only need to look at the past record of the Tory party throughout the last. Well, I mean, even if you only go back 6 years, but you can go back as long as you and I can go, about 30 or 40 years, where the Tory party have never done anything for Scotland whatsoever. So it's they have to come out with something, and it's the boring narrative of we are the party that puts everyone first. But that's not true, because they're not called the self-servatives for nothing.
Thanks, Chris. Also in the election, a new poll shows a majority support the right to hold IndyRef 2. A new poll has shown that Boris Johnson's anti-democratic opposition to a second independence referendum is becoming increasingly untenable, as a majority of people in the UK support a referendum if a majority of MSPs supporting one are elected to Holyrood. The Ipsos Mori poll found that 2/3 of 2019 UK Labour voters would support a referendum, with Keir Starmer and Anna Sarwar now not only out of touch with their party membership, but their voters as well. Across the four nations of the UK, a majority of people think Boris Johnson should not stand in the way of democracy in Scotland. 51% of people in England and Wales support the vote, 66% of people in Northern Ireland support a referendum, and 56% of people in Scotland think a referendum should be held. In other findings from the poll, more than half think that the UK will not exist in its current form in a decade's time. So first of all, Chris, what do you think the form of the UK will be in a decade's time?
I definitely see a succession of Ireland, which was the mantra of Jeremy Corbyn, but that was a bit of an oxymoron, because although he supported a unified Ireland and a free Palestine, didn't see it within Scotland's gift to be independent. That's neither here nor there. But yeah, what's more telling from what you've read out there, Andrew, is the fact that Keir Starmer and Anna Sarwar are paying the union, whereas their own trade unions, this week it's the Trade Unions Congress, and the Trade Unions Congress, the STUC, actually debate as to whether their members should oppose or support it. So that's going to be a telling for Scottish Labour if the Trade Unions Council actually come out in favour of the Constitution being debated. And it's, whilst it's not a major step, it's small baby steps in, for the Scottish trade unions.
Chris? What do you think it'll take to bring Keir Starmer and Anna Sarwar back into line with what this poll suggests is the view of their members and their voters?
Sadly, they won't, and so it's not going to take anything. Again, I go back to what I said earlier on, that if the whole of Scotland voted for independence, would still oppose it. And make no mistake, when you've got a Sir in charge of a Labour Party, which again is another oxymoron, you've got Anna Sarwar in charge of the branch office. Two of them dyed-in-the-wool unionists. They would oppose Scottish independence at every turn. So, there is going to be time when the Labour Party are going to have to wake up and smell the coffee. I don't think it's going to happen within Keir Starmer's tenure. And the bigger question again is, how long will Keir Starmer last? Because he's not enjoying the most highest of poll ratings within his own party. And recently, earlier on this afternoon, we see him thrown out of a pub. Quite simply because the landlord didn't agree with his policies.
It's yes, he seems to. It certainly Starmer appears to be encountering a bit of difficulty with his press and his campaigning over the last few days. Do you think that, in contrast, Anna Sarwar is still enjoying a little bit of a honeymoon, having only recently become the leader of the Labour Party and the British Labour Party in Scotland?
Well, I like how you put down the British Labour Party in Scotland. That's I'll need to keep that one for Twitter. Listen. Yeah, the honeymoon period will last up until the 6th of May. There's no way that Labour will be the party of government in Scotland. There's no way that Tories will be the party of government in Scotland. And there's no point in even mentioning the sideshow that is a Liberal Democrats. So, from that point of view, I think Annas will sort of he won't steady the ship, but he'll steer it. And I was disappointed because I was actually hoping that Monica Lennon would actually win that contest because she was more open to, again, being on par with the STUC, to actually debate the question of the Constitution. And they have to take notice of the fact that, nearly, I would suggest nearly a third of their membership support independence. And they take that into consideration. It's no secret. Well, it might be a secret now, but the SNP Trade Union Group have got a membership of 15,000. That is nearly more than the whole of the Labour support in Scotland. And, they have to wake up and take notice of the fact that trade unionists are really, really turned off by the establishment controlling their destiny and direction. So, as Manas would, want to try and duck and dive and avoid the question, by sort of make this all about the recovery. What they fail to understand is the fact that whilst we are pursuing our democratic right to be independent, we are still going through the recovery. like every other party is talking about. We're actually doing it, boots on the ground at this moment in time. And whether you like the Nicola Sturgeon or whether you prefer Alex Salmond, at the end of the day, we are still operating the government and we are still leading this country safely through the pandemic. And the plan have been from our own party the way that we want to reshape our NHS, our social care, and they can bump their gums on the sideline about their ideas, but at the end of the day, they are just ideas because they won't be in a position to put them into practice.
And it's interesting listening to you speak there, both in terms of the Keir Starmer and Anna Sarwar as well. Do you think that that their determination to oppose a referendum and potentially oppose a referendum that the majority of people in Scotland support, is it a blind spot that they just can't see it or they can't understand it, or do you think is it more dogmatic that that is what the party line has been for many years and that is what it will remain?
Yeah, and to my mind, I think it is more dogmatic because I firmly believe that Anas was chosen as the leader by the money men behind the party. Monica Lennon was not the popular choice because she was open to at least debating the constitution, and that probably was the straw that broke the camel's back. Because you'll know, but not an awful lot of people will know the internal machinations of the PLP. Down in London, they control absolutely everything, and that's why I made the point about the fact that these are London-centric parties that are registered wholly in England. Not one unionist party in Scotland is actually registered in Scotland on the electoral roll. So that tells you all that you need to know about unionist parties and whether they're even open to actually debating the constitutional question.
Absolutely. We'll swap away from Westminster for a moment, and elsewhere in the Scottish election. Speaking today, Nicola Sturgeon described the SNP's plans to deliver a wraparound system of childcare as truly transformational for working families and a central pillar in efforts to deliver a sustainable national economic recovery after the pandemic. While campaigning in Ayr today, the SNP leader hailed the expansion of childcare already undertaken by the SNP, leaving the system almost unrecognisable from that which her government inherited. With the expansion of childcare to 1,140 hours to be completed by August this year, the SNP manifesto sets out plans to go even further by delivering a system of wraparound childcare, providing year-round care before and after school. The least well-off families will pay nothing, with others being asked to make a fair and affordable contribution. Free early years education will also be expanded to 1- and 2-year-olds in low-income families. Chris, what do you make of the SNP manifesto promises regarding what they're now calling wraparound care for children?
Well, to be honest with you, I would have. This is a policy that I was looking for about 20 years ago. Putting my own kids through school because I was or myself, my wife, in the unfortunate position where we didn't have grandparents to look after our kids. And as a socialist, I used to be spitting feathers at the school gate because I could see all these ramping up in order to take their grandchildren home in their SUVs. Probably feeding them, keeping them till about 7 o'clock until the architect and the lawyer would come back from their work and stuff like that, and have absolutely no childcare costs whatsoever. Meanwhile, the working classes of the country were struggling, with childcare issues, and sometimes, in my own case, it's actually two jobs at the one time. So, well, actually three, because being a union rep, it's not. Although it's pretty much it's a full time job, but I most union reps only maybe do about 10 or 15 hours of actual union office work, but when they're actually in the workplace themselves, it's shall we say constant.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. So I can certainly understand how looking with hindsight and thinking of your own circumstances. What do you think? Do you think this as we begin to pursue a national economic recovery after the pandemic? Do you think that this will make an important? Do you think this will make an important contribution in supporting families who, as you say, will undoubtedly be having to pursue jobs and pursue work in a difficult economic climate?
Well, not just this announcement, Andrew, but if you add this together with the proposal of the 4-day working week, I think this will be transformational for Scottish families, and it will give that fine balance that a progressive European country, the likes of Finland and Holland and the Netherlands, all seem to enjoy that fine balance between work and family social life. I honestly think that would be transformational. We've seen it through the pandemic that people, if they're working in their homes, they can certainly do, a 40-hour working week, sometimes with their eyes closed. People turning up for Zoom meetings similar to this, while still wearing their pajamas. So it definitely is, and it also adds into the narrative that's coming out of the SNP at the moment. To actually recovery, also to do with well-being. And well-being of our family's collective mental state of mind, would obviously be beneficial to the economy.
I think that's a very good point that you make, Chris. In terms of better looking after people in a family setting and elsewhere, and then the expectation that we see a financial and a welfare and a health benefit as a society if more care and attention is being paid to families at an earlier stage, and the families who need support are getting support and more support in an effort to address not just the immediate narrow issue of supporting families, but the as you say, the ripple effect that would have potentially in our society more generally, as the focus begins to shift a little bit shift a little bit more towards caring for families and individuals. But let's move on at the moment. Also in election news, the Scottish Greens have revealed how the party's plans for a green recovery will create rural jobs across Scotland, as well as reforestation and restoring peatlands, which would directly create 1,129 jobs. The party has announced a £150 million nature restoration fund to restore key habitats such as wetlands, rivers and coastlines, creating 428 jobs. The party will also support rural businesses and food producers, including the establishment of a national farm land trust to help a new generation of farmers and growers access land. Commenting, the Scottish Greens co-leader Patrick Harvie said, "People visit Scotland for its natural beauty, so restoring nature is not just about protecting species, but also about boosting local economies." Our rural jobs plan would create more opportunities for farms to diversify, supporting ecotourism, nature restoration, and growing new businesses in rural areas. The creation of a national farm land trust would bring a fresh generation into farming, providing young people with access to land and a livelihood. Chris, looking at this first of all from the one perspective, what do you think the message here is with regard to the creation of focusing on the creation of rural jobs?
Fantastic. Rural jobs or the rural economy, to my mind, has been largely forgotten about, by the unionist parties, shall I say. And speaking from experience, having lived in a rural community in Wales, the rural communities were absolutely decimated and left to fend for. It takes an awful lot for one farmer just to repair a dry stone dike. Similar to the dikes that they've got in Wales as well. So, it definitely needs looking after. But again, along with that, it needs to move with the times. So the facilities have to be there. And as the rollout of 4G and 5G to communities that desperately rely on communication, farmers that rely on communication, being out in the middle of nowhere in order to attend to their flock and cattle, that inward investment would also help the actual local community as well. Being a socialist, all being about the redistribution of wealth, this ties wonderfully in with these plan of a 4-day working week. Because if you get 3 days off at the weekend, you've got more time to enjoy the rural pleasures that Scotland has to offer. And again, if those rural communities are being supported by the government to invest into their own community, where people are actually buying local produce, they are going to local high street shops, they are visiting tourist attractions, maybe even going to the theatre on the odd occasion. That's going to do wonders for the Scottish tourist industry, as well as the Scottish economy as a whole. So I mean, it is a sector that has been largely ignored as people are running about with their social media and their kids staying in the house with their Xbox games and all the rest of it. Definitely something that has to be pursued.
We'll touch on the export numbers later on in the programme, but certainly I think there's a connection here, as you say, both the way in which the sector has been treated up to date and now the challenges that our rural economy may well be facing as a result of the impact of Brexit. But we'll come to that later on in the programme. Returning to Westminster for a moment, Scotland's longest-serving MP has blasted the cronyism crisis engulfing the UK government at Westminster, saying that Scots can ditch the House of Sleaze for an independent future. It has been revealed that former Tory Prime Minister David Cameron lobbied the UK Chancellor and Health Secretary to try and secure access for Greensill Capital to taxpayer-funded COVID loan schemes. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is reported to have lobbied on behalf of a Saudi crown prince as multi-billion pounds of contracts were handed out to Tory donors during the COVID crisis without any competitive tendering processes. It has also been reported that Labour's Shadow Attorney General, Charles Falconer, is a partner in a law firm that provides advice on political lobbying. Commenting, the SNP's Deputy Westminster leader, Kirsten Oswald MP, said, "Westminster is a broken system. Neither the Tories or the Labour Party have a leg to stand on when it comes to condemning the cronyism rife in Whitehall and Westminster. They have perpetuated it for decades. This old boys club system isn't working for Scotland, where people have made it clear they want a transparent parliament that works to build and maintain a fair and equal society. So, Chris, firstly, what is your take on the old boys club at Westminster? Who is it working for, do you think?
It's working for the establishment. The unfortunate thing about England is the fact that they are a two-party state, and they will never be anything other than that. The Labour Party, which is again another anomaly, when I was viewing Jeremy Corbyn's tender, is the fact that he dearly wished to be a part of everything that he fought against. Jeremy Corbyn was anti-establishment, but he wished to be, entrenched within the establishment, and take on, their murky ways. And it is the epitome of corporate capitalism, which allows the Tory party to get away with carte blanche, some really, really dodgy deals. We've seen it in 2014 up here with the scandal of the dark money, all linked from the Scottish Tories and the DUP and swirling around, various hedge funds and all the rest of it. And nothing was ever done about that. Now we've got Matt Hancock up to his neck in dirty deals with his family. We've seen dirty deals with regards companies setting up for procurement purposes that, at one time used to sell crisps. It is absolutely shocking. And Kirsten Oswald, my own MP, is absolutely 100% correct. That and Scotland always has been, maybe not as socialist as what I would like it, but definitely, it has never bought into corporate greed, in any way, such shape or form. We have to get back to the core values that Scotland pursue, and that is being a part of an inclusive society within Europe that wishes to share the pool and not control the pool.
Absolutely, Chris. Do you think there's obviously the focus of the allegations and the issues are focused largely on the Tories at the moment, but do you think there's a risk that because they stand so close together, often from a Scottish perspective, that there's a risk that it will start to bleed across or start to shift across from the Tories to the Labour Party as well?
That already has, because I hear today that Keir Starmer has actually refused to sign a motion raised by Caroline Lucas in order to have the cronyism investigated, and actually debated on the floor. And obviously that motion went straight to Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker. And I only glanced across the story. I've not read it 100%, but it clearly says that Keir Starmer declined to put his name to that motion paper. So that again tells you everything that you know about the direction of travel that Keir Starmer wishes to take. If that had been Jeremy Corbyn, I would hope that he would have firmly opposed that and actually publicly backed it. Because it was the one thing that he was good at. He was good at highlighting the dodges and the cronyism, that is rife within the Conservatives. It's the epitome of the Conservatives, and with the elevation of Boris Johnson, was fantastically a member of that famous Etonian Boys Club picture that was taken the black and white picture where they're all in top hat and tails. Uh, it's it just epitomizes everything to do with the upper class society within you know politics. Scotland has got no interest in whatsoever.
It's an interesting point that you make. I think Keir Starmer's background, his father was a toolmaker and his mother, I think, was a nurse, is my recollection. But he seems to have bought into the establishment quite firmly as well. Or do you detect that? Okay, we'll move on to the next story, Chris. The And it's something that we've touched on already, and we'll come back to it, and we'll focus on it now more clearly. New export figures show reality of the jobs lost because of Brexit. Figures published by the European Union's Statistics Office, Eurostat, show the UK's exports to the UK almost halved in the first 2 months of the year compared with last year. EU imports from the UK dropped by 47% to 16.6 billion euros in January and February 2021. These figures present a much worse picture for the UK's exports to the EU than the figures from the Office of National Statistics published last week, with Eurostat reporting the December to February fall in UK exports to the EU was 32% instead of 15%. The overall value of food exports, including Scottish seafood, is now lower than in any month of 2020, having dropped by £300 million since December. Commenting, the SNP candidate for Edinburgh Southern, Katrina MacDonald, said, "These figures highlight the immense damage that the Tories' job-destroying Brexit is doing to Scotland's economy. It should serve as a wake-up call that Boris Johnson will always prioritise Brexit over a sustainable economic recovery from the pandemic." Now, Chris, we were talking about the rural economy a few minutes ago, and this is another aspect that I think is relevant and important. We're seeing here reports from Eurostat that of a significant drop in exports to the EU, and of course we know that from Scotland, food exports and food and drink exports are a significant part of our economy. What do you think the impact of such a significant drop is going to be on our rural economy in Scotland?
It's going to be cataclysmic, as not nearly gravitas to use, because honestly, the longer that we as union, then it's going to be. It's going to take us longer to get ahead of the game. Before Brexit, Scotland was doing reasonably well with its exports into the European Union. Everything very seamless, and everything was progressively with what they call a just-in-time supply. And that is, again, I'm speaking from experience of being a chef. If you've got fresh salmon, the French restaurants want that salmon as fresh as it can be, and they're willing to pay for it. If that salmon turns up 12 hours later and the flesh is looking slightly greyer than pink, they want a plate. And it's as simple as that, and it'll end up in a fish stew or and maybe a bisque or something like that, and it's just used for run of the mill, not used as in the main plate. And that goes exactly the same for all our other wonderful products, the likes of scallops and mussels, oysters, you name it. But it's not even just that, because I have to highlight again Ruth Watson's wonderful work that she does for keeping the brand Scottish. And again, we go back to the rural economy, which is all these great farmers. Whether whether they are Tory voters or not, it's neither here nor there. They are producing Scottish produce, and that Scottish produce is actually helping our economy. And again, it's been decimated because there is no point in serving a plate of potatoes if the fish isn't there to go along with it. It's the whole complete deal. So that means that everything has to work. The farm has to work. The fishermen have to work. Then there's obviously the processing of actually gutting the fish and cleaning it. There's the process of cleaning the vegetables and getting them to market and packaging them, with good providence to show exactly where that product comes from. The wider ramifications of Brexit were never actually thought out, and again, it was something dreamt up by some mad scientists within White that thought that British exceptionalism could do better than the EU.
Chris, do you think that as the SNP candidate Katrina said, do you think that these numbers will serve as a wake up call that for Westminster the priority is Brexit, whereas for others and perhaps in Scotland a greater priority is a sustainable economic recovery from the pandemic?
To be honest with you, and indulge me to make this point, I think it will only apply to those who are politically engaged. And this is the real sad thing about this, Andrew, at this moment in time, because some of the electorate have been totally tuned out of politics because of the pandemic, understandably. So it is only the politically engaged that are actually going to take cognizance of this and actually sort of like think, wait a minute, there is a better way to go. And the better way to go is to trade with Europe. People are not actually seeing, in their homes what it means to be outside of Europe yet. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, on January the 2nd, everyone will see exactly what it means not to be in Europe." I think it takes longer than that, and I think now it's starting to play out. So I think it's going to be too. It's not going to be in time for May the 6th. It's definitely a factor that Katrina rightly highlights, but I think it's only for the politically engaged.
Well, we'll have to wait and see if people begin to recognise that impact, and I'm sure that we'll come back to it and talk to you again about it in the future, Chris. I'm absolutely sure about that. Looking at Westminster again for the minute, the number 10 race report that has been identified by UN experts as trying to normalise white supremacy. A controversial report into racial disparities in the UK attempts to normalise white supremacy, and the government should reject its findings, the UN human rights experts have warned. The report by the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities, published at the end of March, concluded that while racism and racial injustice still existed, geography, family influence, socio-economic background, culture and religion all had a greater impact on life chances. The report said it did not find evidence of institutional racism in the areas it examined, such as policing and health. In a statement, the UN Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent said, in 2021, it is stunning to read a report on race and ethnicity that repackages racist tropes and stereotypes into fact, twisting data and misapplying statistics and studies into conclusory findings and ad hominem attacks on people of African descent. The experts criticised the report's focus on family structure to explain racial disparities, describing it as a tone-deaf attempt at rejecting the lived realities of people of African descent and other ethnic minorities in the UK. It said the report failed to provide any persuasive evidence for claims there was no institutional racism in the UK and instead cited dubious evidence. So, Chris, is this another example of a tone-deaf Westminster government or a tone-deaf Tory government?
Of course it is, and it shows, a dark, sinister link to the dare I say, neo-fascism, which is, the core of right-wing politics, where it marginalises against people of ethnicity. I think it was the other day that Matt Hancock was actually put on the line by Buffy Ridge, where she wonderfully asked him how many BME cabinet members there were, and he couldn't name one. I think he finally managed to mention Kwasi Kwarteng, but that was 3 minutes of excruciating criticism of the representation within the Tory party.
So absolutely, Chris. It's interesting that in that interview, Mr. Hancock couldn't remember the Home Secretary or the who's of Asian descent, and the Chancellor, who is also of Asian descent. It's not a surprise, perhaps, that his memory was failing him. But again, I think we're likely to hear more from the UN and other experts regarding this report that appeared at the end of March. We'll move on, however, to news in Europe with Alexei Navalny being transferred to a Russian prison hospital. Russia's main opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, was transferred to a prison hospital, the prison service and his lawyer said today, 20 days into a hunger strike that has brought international warnings of consequences should he die in jail. Allies of Navalny, who have had no access to him since last week, said they were braced for bad news about his health. They are planning mass countrywide demonstrations later this week, which the Russian authorities have branded illegal. Navalny's case has further isolated Moscow at a time when US President Joe Biden's administration has announced tougher economic sanctions, and the Czech Republic, a member of NATO and the European Union, has expelled Russian spies, accusing Moscow of a role in deadly 2014 explosions at an arms storage depot. Russia's prison service said in a statement that a decision had been taken to transfer Navalny, who is 44 years of age, to a regional prison hospital. His condition was satisfactory, and he was being given vitamin therapy with his consent, the statement said. So, Chris, more concerning developments with regard to the health and well-being of Mr. Navalny. What do you think is likely to happen next?
It's difficult to tell because anybody, I mean, obviously, people will know I'm very, very attached to Ireland, so I'm very familiar with the case of Bobby Sands and his comrades that went on a hunger strike. And people that go on hunger strikes don't willingly agree to taking vitamin supplements. So I think that's maybe a bit of a dodgy statement. It's got ramifications not just for Russia, but again, as you quite rightly point out, for relations with America and also the rest of the Western world, who are starting to now distance themselves from this whole affair. It's really telling, the fact that nothing has been really debated about within British politics. They've steered clear away from this. There's been a lot of links with regards the involvement into elections, Russian involvement into party lobbying, to do with David Cameron. So I think we can, I mean, Britain's always the first one. I mean, obviously the poisoning in England, they were quick to condemn Russia on that score. but they're less quick to actually point out, shall we say, tragedies within Russia's own land, because it doesn't affect Britain. This is obviously it's a humanitarian issue, as well as a political issue, and if one man decides to go on hunger strike to stand by his principles, then the rest of the Western world should actually take up and sit notice, because obviously, being on hunger strike is not a sustained action, as we've seen throughout history. And this could really, really backfire on Russia. It really backfire on them. And, to turn around and say to the Russian people that all these demonstrations are illegal, again, it's just, we can, drop things on that with the British government, with the anti rally thing, that was happening a couple of weeks ago, where they were basically in danger of becoming a police state by denying people the right to actually rally and make their petitions known.
Of course, and as we say, if the allies of Navalny are planning mass countrywide demonstrations later this week, and the Russian authorities have already condemned those planned demonstrations as illegal, do you think we're going to see another crackdown on opposition to President Putin? Are we going to see another confrontation with the security services?
I would say that's almost inevitable. But what I would see we are able to over the is other countries showing solidarity, for these demonstrations, and that might actually force Putin's hand. Putin's not one to publicly cave in, but he could, gracefully withdraw from this. And we all know that throughout the years, Russia's great at doing the overt cover up and all the rest of it. I could possibly see that Putin would want to maybe go down that road.
Of course. Elsewhere in European news, the German Greens co-leader has challenged to become the next chancellor. The co-leader of Germany's Greens, Annalena Baerbock, announced today that she would run to become chancellor in September's elections, and that's the first time the Greens have sought the top job in its 40-year history. Baerbock, a former champion trampolinist who has seen support for her party rise over the past year, said she would offer a new start and focus on investing in education, digital and green technologies. Analysts said the chance of an outright win for the Ecologist Party was still a long shot, though the Greens have become a formidable force that has profited from voters' fatigue with Chancellor Angela Merkel's Conservatives. While the Greens still trail the Conservatives by around 5 points in the polls, divisions in the Conservative camp that has ruled Germany for 16 years have increased the chance of a breakthrough. At a news conference, Baerbock sought to allay fears about her relative lack of experience, saying, "Democracy lives off change. Yes, I was never a chancellor and never a minister. I stand for renewal. Others stand for the status quo." Baerbock was nominated for the chancellorship by her party and formally presented today by co-leader Robert Habeck, an orderly process that stood in contrast to public divisions amongst the Conservative CDU and CSU parties. Now, Chris, we've touched on green politics in Scotland already, and now we're talking here about green politics in Germany, one of the large economies in which the Green Party really took off 20 or more years ago. Do you think there's a connection between the progress that the Greens are making in Germany and also the progress that the Greens hope to make in our own Scottish election in May?
Well, I think it is actually, and I think it is down to the fact that the renewables sector could obviously benefit from not just Scottish technology, but from German technology as well. And the German Greens, as you say, have got a wealth of experience in challenging local environmental issues. And the other great thing for me, the one thing that does appeal to me, is the fact that it actually shows that countries should have more diverse parties enjoying greater support within the electorate. If you look at England, its sole MP of Caroline Lucas, representing the Green Party, I think is absolutely shameful. I think it's really, really bad that they don't enjoy, better support from English voters. But then that is possibly down to the narrative of the right wing press, which is, as you well know, engineered to prop up the establishment parties within Britain. So that could also add into the fact that Germany has always been either controlled by thankfully moderate parties, but more latterly by raving monster loony parties such as the German Nationalist Socialist Party, which obviously, as you well know, became the Nazi Party. So, from that point of view, that closing closing down the right wing narrative uh, from within Europe would actually be obviously a welcome thing, from my perspective, anyway.
Well, we'll see. But the prospect of a Green politician running for the leadership of Germany is a development that I know that we'll continue to pay close attention to, and we'll be tracking Annalena Baerbock's campaign and her progress in that campaign as the news develops over the coming months. Our final story this evening is from the United States, and it is that NASA's miniature robot helicopter Ingenuity performed a successful takeoff and landing on Mars earlier today, achieving the first powered, controlled flight by an aircraft over the surface of another planet, the US Space Agency has said. The twin-rotor whirligig's debut on the red planet marked a 21st century Wright brothers moment for NASA, which said success could pave the way for new modes of exploration on Mars and other destinations in the solar system, such as Venus and Saturn's moon, Titan. Mission managers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory near Los Angeles burst into applause and cheers as engineering data beamed back from Mars confirmed that the 1.8 kilogram solar-powered helicopter had performed its maiden 39-second flight as planned. Altimeter readings from the rotorcraft showed that it had become airborne at 7:34 GMT, climbed as programmed to a height of 3 meters, then hovered steadily in place over the Martian surface for half a minute before touching back down safely on its 4 legs. Now, Chris, very quickly, with your background in aviation, do you think this news from NASA suggests that you may have employment opportunities in Mars in due course?
Oh dear Lord! The corporate financiers, Richard Branson and stuff like that, are taking travel and tourism in that trajectory, shall we say? But the one comment that I was going to make was, isn't it wonderful what's been achieved, and the innovation in order to go to Mars at a fraction of the cost of what it took to implement the test and trace app within Britain.
Your point's a very well made one, Chris. Now then, having finished that story from NASA, that is the news in Scotland at 7 this evening. Thank you, Chris, for joining us and for sharing your thoughts and insights. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. If you would like to support us, then please consider subscribing or donating to Broadcasting Scotland. You will find the link to do that on the screen now. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, or in making the organisation work, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. Meantime, thank you again, Chris, for your contributions tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening on Broadcasting Scotland. And please, everyone, have a great evening.
What distinguishes Broadcasting Scotland from a website or blog, apart from our brilliant programmes?
Hi there, I'm Gordon Ross.
Are the costs we face to enable us to produce those programmes. These costs are significant and ongoing. However, our facilities are able to do so much more if only we had the staff. In the last year, some of our supporters have cancelled their subscriptions. In one way, we would prefer it if it was because they didn't like us, rather than it being because of the financial pressures which we are all under because of COVID. The really positive outcome of our fundraiser is that at a time of economic challenge in Scotland, we will use your donations to create jobs and in a small way contribute to improving the Scottish economy. If you want us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster, able to provide an alternative mainstream television platform, then please support us.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
Just imagine what we could do if we had even 1% of the BBC Scotland channel's budget. Imagine. And then please consider turning your imagination into reality. Please support us if you can afford it.